Ramesh Kamble is the Associate Professor at the Department of Sociology at the Mumbai University. He's also the Phule Ambedkar Chair. And within Bombay and in Maharashtra, he is well known for having extensively worked on the history of the Dalit Panthers. Thank you, sir, for being here. I would now like to call the speaker of this particular session, Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocate at the Supreme Court. He's a senior advocate who's worked as advocate on reward for the state of Karnataka at the Supreme Court, during which he's handled landmark cases such as the ones related to the Kaveri and the Krishna water disputes.
This session focuses on the most cardinal and basic value to be human, that is freedom. How freely we are choosing our own surveillance is what the last session really brought to us. The moment we access freedom, we seem to be monitored, mapped, regulated, surveilled upon. So in a way, freedom comes with fear of freedom. That is the kind of society in which we live. There is quest for freedom, and at the same time, there is also fear of freedom. What is it that you should freely choose seem to be not only surveilled upon but regulated and monitored. You can buy things freely, I don't know, whether it is so, but you can definitely not freely think and question. So there are certain kind of freedoms are in a way tolerated, allowed, okay? But certain kind of freedoms continue to be monitored, regulated, and in a way denied, outrightly denied. That is the story of freedom. Freedom has always been most sought after, but rarely accessed commodity or really accessed value in this country. Who is seeking freedom? What kind of freedom you seek? From what location you seek freedom? These questions also become important when we discuss this whole idea about freedom. I was reminded of this very interesting film by Denzel Washington, The Great Debaters, in which the protagonist, who is played by Denzel Washington himself, he pointed out, while he was asked a question about his background, who is he? He said, we are people without records. We do not matter. Our existence does not matter. Your records matter. You matter when you are recorded. But now here, you being recorded is to be monitored. You see? So on the being recorded is not necessarily being recognized or being recognized as bearer of freedom. You are recorded and recognized for specific kind of freedom. This is the scene in which I think we live today. So this session definitely will address these questions of freedom and surveillance. Yes, I mean, I don't know how many minutes we have for 20 minutes for presentation and then 10 minutes for discussion. 5 minutes for discussion. Anyway, that is what. May I now request our Senior Counsel Sanjay Hegde to take over.
Let me make a confession to begin with. I come from Bombay. It's always been Bombay to me. I left Bombay as a young lawyer, and it was around that time that I left Bombay that it turned into Mumbai. And my first story on surveillance comes from those times. Those were violent times. The mob was out there. The mob used to go from housing society to housing society, looking at the names on the boards down there and deciding which house to attack. It was a senior advocate who's still with us, Iqbal Chagla, who refused to take his name off. He said, "This is the country which my father opted to be in. If I have to change or take off my name from that name board out there, then that is not my country." The reason I tell you this story is simple. Surveillance in those days was manual. People had to do footwork to go from place to place, check out who it was. Around the time that I moved to Delhi and I worked with the then Attorney General of India, his big client at that point of time was the then incomparable Election Commissioner, Mr. T.N. Seshan. Mr. Seshan came about with the idea, with a very laudable idea, that there's so much cheating, dhandli going on in elections, people are forging identities, and that is why we shall have our voters' ID cards with the voters' photo on that. Irrespective of election commissioners, the actual work of the election commission is done by some very solid bureaucrats who have been in the election commission, especially a gentleman called Mr. S.K. Mendirata, who's been secretary forever and ever and has been consultant thereafter. I told Mr. Mendirata, it's a very good idea. But what you are doing is also laying the foundation stones of a totalitarian system of governance in India. Because previously, these were names, these were addresses. Now you're putting faces to people. And once those faces are there are many uses that this information will be put to. My worst fears came true in 2002, when in the hands of Pana Pramukhs, these very voter cards and these voting lists were used in Ahmedabad to go from society to society, from area to area, catching the people whom they wanted to catch. Now this was 2002. From there on, 17 years on, technology has grown. It has become much more easy to catch people by their face, by their names, by their identity. And what was happening in Bombay 1992-93, Gujarat 2002, was a phrase which we have heard today after Pulwama. Ghar mein ghus ke marenge. We like that phrase when it is applied to the other side. We have not thought about how it is when it is applied in our own houses. Our idea of privacy, our idea of what freedom is, the freedom that Professor Kamble referred to, is in a sense that if we are law-abiding citizens, if we do not trouble anyone, we can go safely to our houses and there nobody can question us. In fact, long ago, William Pitt, the Earl of Chatham, defined it in the English context. You've all heard the phrase, the Englishman's home is his castle. But the full citation reads, the poorest man may in his cottage bid defiance to all the forces of the crown. It may be frail, its roof may shake, the wind may blow through it, the storm may enter, the rain may enter, but the King of England cannot enter. If I were to put it now in the Mumbai language, माणसाचं झोपडं त्याचं स्वतःचं आहे. त्याच्यात वारा येऊ शकतंय, पाऊस येऊ शकतंय, पण परवानगीशिवाय भारतचं प्रधानमंत्री पण येऊ शकत नाही. This is the conception of freedom that we all started off with. This is the conception of freedom that our founding fathers gave. That is the democracy that we think we have. We had the previous presentation of Mr. Kiran Kumar, who told you so eloquently how in the hands of giant corporations we've all become commodities. Each of these corporations knows exactly who we are, what we do, how we think. They have these algorithms which will now teach us how to think, whom to want, whom to like, whom to dislike. This is essentially a product of what is called the attention economy. The attention economy works like the real economy, except that the currency there is human attention. In the real economy, we work for money. Everything is expressed in terms of money. But in the attention economy, and which is increasingly getting to be the dominant economy, how much attention do you pay to what? What are your tastes? How can that attention be manipulated? And so we have all these giant corporations which can do that. And we have willingly subjected ourselves to those corporations simply because those products are free. When those products are free, then you are the commodity. You go there, and the attention you give there gives them data, which in turn they monetize. And who else? In addition to monetizing it among other companies, what do? They also sell it to the government. Governments use them. Governments use them to come into power. Governments use them to stay in power. And governments also use them at times for policy making. Now, I don't mean to say that the surveillance state comes out of wrong impulses, that everybody, every government, every corporation wants to look over your shoulder and find out what you are doing in the manner of a overprotective mother or a nagging wife. That's not how it is. They also work out of impulses which start off as noble or even right to begin with. Because the surveillance state actually has grown out of the welfare state. The welfare state demands that people be fed, people be housed, people be given medical attention, and people be given education. Now, in order to administer that properly, you need proper statistics, you need to know who the people are, and then you need to broadly classify them. And so, one way that the welfare state used to operate was to send money at a problem. Then Rajiv Gandhi, it was, who pointed out that out of every rupee that went, only 15 paisa reached the ultimate user. There were leakages all the way. How do you stop? How do you stop leakages? How do you ensure that? So therefore came this giant project that the Indian government started. It started as a welfare activity, which was Aadhaar. It starts off primarily for two reasons. It started off as a pilot project in Assam and in the northeast, where there was a huge problem of trans-border infiltration, and newer people were coming in. How do we administer all that? And that's how it was born. But as the program, the pilot program went on, it became apparent to more and more people that the data that could be collected by forcing every individual, locking every individual to one number and a set of captured biometrics, was then the possibility that you could track that individual throughout in whatever activity. So that that the Indian state could be a super Google, Facebook and everything rolled in one. And now comes the basic difference. Facebook, Google or whoever else can't jail you. The Indian government can. So now you have the legislative power and the power of the state allied with the dominance over information harvesting. Now, you started off Aadhaar as a mere executive order, so therefore there was no parliamentary oversight. Parliament never got to even figuring out what all the possibilities were. People started questioning, and who were the great questioners other than civil society, other than the Mumbai collective, other than all people like us? The first petitions against Aadhaar was filed by Justice Puttaswamy of the Karnataka High Court, and he is on record later after some judgment saying that I signed the petition only because Justice Rama Joyce asked me to. And behind Justice Rama Joyce and Swapan Das Gupta and Upmanyu Hazarika and the whole thing was the entire BJP ecosystem, which said, Aadhaar, no. This is the UPA trying to get us all into one net. No, we shall oppose it. This is Nandan Nilekani, who is going to be a Congress candidate in 2014, a possible finance minister or possible some minister. We have to oppose it. So the Aadhaar petitions were filed. They started getting some sort of traction in the various high courts. There were petitions in the Supreme Court, and then 2014 happens. 2014, you see, it's a good thing for a lot of people to say a lot of things when they're out of power. When you get to power, then the matter doesn't look quite the same. What is obnoxious when you're out of power becomes very useful when you are in power. And so, Nilekani himself was committed to the project. He went and sold it to the next government. The new government bought it, and it became more than an enthusiastic adopter. It not only became an adopter, it became an evangelizer. It knew that there were serious ethical and constitutional questions behind which could be examined. So it went for a great program of Aadhaar outreach. It also decided to make it much more inconvenient not to have an Aadhaar. So therefore, whatever services that you wanted, they started going after that. You want a mobile phone? Please give us your Aadhaar. You want to fly? Give us your Aadhaar. You want rations? Give us your Aadhaar. And they went to the extent where they got innocuous orders from the court saying, okay, if you want all these mobile phones without verification, we'll bring in an Aadhaar-based program to verify that. And then they went around saying, Aadhaar is compulsory, the Supreme Court has said so. So there was this imperial overreach of Aadhaar. And when privacy questions came, the Attorney General of India solemnly stood up and said, what privacy? There's no fundamental right to privacy. 7 judges of the court have said in a judgment that there is no real right of privacy. The Supreme Court had to say, the calculation of the Attorney General was correct, because if a 7-judge judgment is there, it can be overruled only by a larger bench. And getting together 9 judges of the Supreme Court is almost an impossible task, as Justice Gowda will tell you. So, by the time that the bench would finally hear it, they would have covered everyone. That was the thinking. Mercifully, that did not happen. A 9-judge bench was constituted, and unanimously the Supreme Court said, we hold that privacy is part of a the fundamental right to life. To that extent, we have a Supreme Court judgment. But then came the actual question of the constitutionality of the Aadhaar program. In the meanwhile, I forgot to tell you that Parliament had passed an act to ensure that there were no great questions and to ensure that the Rajya Sabha didn't get a voice. They said, no, this is a money bill because it involves expenditure out of the Consolidated Fund of India. That was constitutional skullduggery of the highest order. Be that as it may, when the matter came, when the actual application came to the 5 judges of the Supreme Court, to my mind, unfortunately, it may one day be written as the Supreme Court never missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity. 4-1, they have upheld Aadhaar on one footing that if the government is to give you benefits, then it is entitled to know what you are. And if you have to pay your taxes to the government, then also the government is entitled to know who you are. Therefore, effectively, they've got the top half, they've got they've got the large teeming millions, and everybody who has an Aadhaar, you are inside the system. They've mercifully held that Aadhaar is voluntary, but it is voluntary only in the sense that Henry Ford said of the first Model T Fords, that you can have any color as long as it's black. So you have a gigantic surveillance program which has your number, your Billa number, and your eyes and your thumbprints. You have been reduced to an Angutha Chap republic and reduced to mere numbers without stating which the government will not deal with it. Is this democracy? I have a lot of material, but let me be brief, that this was one side of the welfare state which morphed into the surveillance state. The other side was always there. Police functioning. The police have to go after bad men. Now, to go after bad men, how do you do it? You have to surveil everybody. Only then can we check out who the real bad men are. So therefore, every conversation is recorded. Every conversation is scanned by various institutions developed by CDAT, CDOT, and so many acronyms. But the end result is that when they are looking for bombs, they are looking for explosion, they are looking for missiles and things like that, and the keywords which set off their searches. Everything else that you speak, everything else that you write, everything else that you may think about, all gets surveyed, and that material is also there. And the real problem is this. The real problem is that with technology having increased its capacity so much that it can be stored indefinitely, anything that you do will never be forgotten. In the days that when Mr. Ram and Justice Gowda could go out in the students' movement, protest, and be done with it, at best they had to hope that the policeman didn't put it in the normal FIR with all the names. Today, any protest, this meeting, there are all these cameras. Everything is being surveyed, everything will be YouTubed, and everything will be there on the net forever. Tomorrow, if for some reason this meeting was to be declared illegal or you had to explain it under some vague act or the other, you can't deny it. And you have leaders who have gone on saying that we will make our public places safe. Everywhere there will be surveillance cameras. Please note that the surveillance state starts off as welfare. It continues as security. But at the end of the day, you are its prisoner. I could have gone on what I think needs to be done, but let me just keep the message brief. There's very little that we can do. we can reduce our footprints, our digital exposures. But the one thing that we can do is, we should at least elect to power people whom we can trust with all this portion of our lives. Be very careful when you vote. Thank you very much.
My question is, how the other countries have managed this, or they are managing this?
That was a wonderful presentation. So where's your book on this?
We'll take one more question for that.
So, as you mentioned that a surveillance state starts off as a welfare state, but sir, is there some way where we can draw a line between that? That we stop at a welfare state or stop at security, we do not move towards a surveillance state? Or how do we protect the leak of information to the government where it should be in the hands of private individuals who maintain them in their own capacity? Where do we draw a line between?
Okay, if I were to take questions one by one. First answer is Mr. Ram. I have several books in me, but I have a busy career as a lawyer and I'm a lazy person. So when I get past my anecdotage and I'm nearing my dotage, I promise you one or two books will come. Now the other questions on how are the other countries managing and where do we draw a line. Now, a similar program came out in the UK. The UK started off with a register of citizens. They finally decided that it was just not possible to ensure safety and privacy, and that this would be antithetical to democracy. They had to scrap the project, but they still could not recover all the data because it had leaked over and over again. How do we ensure? Now ultimately, the only mechanism is the government. You have to have governments which ensure that data which is collected for a single purpose is used only for that purpose, that unauthorized copies do not go out, and that there is a cost, including possibly criminal costs, if that data is wrongly used. We are still in the process of drawing up our privacy legislation. There is the Shri Krishna report. There are several measures that a lot of civil society, Mr. Kiran Kumar and others have all asked for, but it is going to be a long drawn out process. The way to stop a surveillance state is the simple old formula. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. At every stage when somebody asks you for your Aadhaar, or please, I tell them, please show me your authority. Can I give you an alternative? Can I give you my passport details, my driving license number? See, the point is that once you give the Aadhaar number, then that is a common identifier over several databases. And when you've given it for a gas connection, the gas, most of our public sector enterprises and other service providers don't know how to handle data or the privacy data of an individual. They put it out on all kinds of websites. You Google around and you are likely to find your Aadhaar number. And remember that giving your Aadhaar number to somebody is giving that person a key to your life. Ensure that it is worth it. Thank you for being a very wonderful and patient audience.
Thank you for this session. Let me make a very last and brief comment that while number and welfare and security are suspect, claim for justice, claim for life without safe life with safety is also most fundamental right that we have to reiterate again and again. Since 70 years now, Dalits are exposed to institutionalized violence. That violence is so systemic, so everyday, so so routine, so banal, that violence does not even seek any kind of recognition anywhere. I think while we are also looking at this kind of denial of freedom, one also must look at this ongoing, continuous, routine, normalized violence in the name of caste, violence in the name of religion, violence in the name of gender. All these forms of violence also must have to be very, very strongly condemned, and that their systemic character be understood, realized and fought. I think that is what this gathering should also say.